the progress of the field. Thank you so much for being with us,
My
Congressman Tonko.
Hi,
I
everyone.
think Dylan gave some of the intro, but let's go over. He is a 9-term congressman from New York, covering the 20th, which is where the state Senate, the state capital is, and is a well-known champion of Alzheimer's disease, and is most importantly the founding co-chair of the Longevity Science Caucus.
Right.
So for which we are also very grateful. I too, like you, was originally an engineer, and actually quite a lot of people in the room were engineers before they joined the. Some hands going up before
I'd
they
say
joined
once an engineer, always.
the aging and longevity field.
Yeah.
So what made you go into politics from engineering?
Well, I started my political route in county government, and so that was a part-time position. So I continued to work as an engineer and always had a passion for politics. I'm of the generation that was smitten by the JFK, MLK, RFK years, and just saw government as an instrument for the good and for taking us to a higher plane. And I think a number of people in that whole stretch of Camelot and the merit, I had a dream efforts of Martin Luther King, Dr. King, were pulled into this arena. But working as an engineer, I thought, well, I've got this passion for politics. Maybe I'll campaign for folks, and did that for state candidates, congressional candidates, statewide candidates, congressional, local. And the local committee said, you have more energy and enthusiasm than the candidates. I said, well, I'm not going to be a volunteer and not do my best job. And they said, well, we need to run you for something. I said, oh, well, I was working from the sidelines. There's a bashful gene here, so I don't think I'd be a good candidate and a comfortable candidate. And my dull moment was when I decided that, fear of having to deal with a lot of interaction probably would be minimalized at the county level. That was my dull moment, and that was in '75. That ran and beat a long-term incumbent, and served there for, I think, 4 terms, and then ran for the state assembly, served 25 years, and then went over to NYSERDA, was asked by the governor then to be CEO of the New York State Energy Research and Development Authority. Said yes to that, and it was, now you've got your dream job, you're implementing policy for which you worked for 25 years in the state assembly. 15 of those 25 years, the last 15 were as energy chair. And so I was comfortable in that nest, and then a congressional seat opened, and everybody kept saying, your name's all over this seat, and you need to run, and I kept fighting it, and thought, they said, let your heart roll. I said, well, let me just look at this through every lens, and the energy and environment lenses spoke to me that we really needed better national policy and, better stewardship of the environment, and said yes, and now running for my 10th term.
I believe Dylan also got into this starting by campaigning.
Yes.
So people start there and go on to greater things.
Well, I think it develops a passion in your heart and soul, and you ought to feed that with the work that you can crank out in the public sector opportunity. And
we didn't cover this in the intro, but you're also on the Energy and Commerce Committee, which is, for people who don't know, one of the top tier committees in Congress, and despite those 2 words not seeming like they have anything to do with it, that's the committee that has jurisdiction over healthcare, including the FDA and the CDC and the NIH. And
everything from the gamut of physical health to behavioral and mental health, and just about all health-related legislation is assigned to the Energy and Commerce Committee.
And you're also well known as a advocate for Alzheimer's research. So how did you get into how did that become a cause for you?
Interesting. I'm a firm believer that we need to diversify and get more scientists and technical types into Congress, into legislative branches of government, because I think we have a different perspective, a different training, a different background to lend to the policy development. And as we continue to grow more and more into technological opportunity, biomedical research, you name it, science in its own right, this needs to be recognized, appreciated, and respected. And so when I got to town as a newbie in 2009, I ran in the 2008 election. There'd been some impact, heavy impact on my family with Alzheimer's. And I thought, well, here's a way for a science-based type to assert myself in a way that might be meaningful. Talk to the groups that were supporting some legislation, and now am probably the prime sponsor of most of their legislation, and was recognized by the organization nationally, but just love working on the issue, and got deeply invested in the National Plan for Alzheimer's, which had at its initial moment a 2025 target date for reaching our goals. I was part of the legislation, carried the legislation to advance that to 2035, making a lot of headway, but more work needs to be done. But at the epicenter of all this, it was about better diagnosis, earlier diagnosis, support for respite, and ultimately a cure. And so at that epicenter of that legislation is research, biomedical research. And through that lens, learned that there were a lot of ways that both parties had manipulated some of that research. And I don't think we should politicize it. We should take it in its natural state and allow the policymakers to work it as they wish, but give us the unadulterated package. And so that gave birth to my authoring the Scientific Integrity Act, so that all agencies that deal with grants or research are operating under standards that speak to accountability, transparency, and having those standards be met, and being aggressive about it. And that's still languishing. We're still trying to get that bill done. But I really think that, especially in this moment of our history, to disregard science and disrespect it is unacceptable and intolerable. And we have a long way to go in an innovation economy, in the clean energy concept, where we need to be better stewards of the environment. And when it comes to issues like those facing the Longevity Caucus, there is a need for, embracing science and giving it every shot for the opportunity. And the proposed cuts, draconian at times, to research, just are in contrast, sharp contrast, to what I believe is the DNA of our culture. And that is a pioneer spirit that is constantly looking to create, explore, and discover, and come up with better means by which to achieve our goals.
So let's talk about the caucus. So give us the quick backstory of like how the Longevity Science Caucus came about, and how you came to be the one of the.
Well, knowing Dylan and his dad, and having people approach us about, having a more formalized, a structured concept that enables us to look at longevity, to look at the science that's applicable to that, just made a lot of sense. And I thought, well, listening to their concerns and responding, all of us, in a way that would allow us to structure a caucus, bipartisan in nature, would be a very helpful tool, so that we could make solid relationships with the clinical community, with the research community, with scientists, patient advocates, anything that can bring to us the starkness, the awareness of different data compilation that should be shared with us, and potential solutions that people could advance. And so had worked with some members that in the interim of getting this started had either retired or had not been elected to come back, but had a working relationship with Congressman Bilderakis, Gus Bilderakis from Florida. And
we'll have him tomorrow.
Oh, good. And, we've worked well together. One of the things that bonded us was kind of a replication of the Alzheimer's legislation with a national plan for Parkinson's, and with a review that we were having an Energy and Caucus on the progress of the Alzheimer's plan. There were representatives at that hearing from the Michael J. Fox Foundation, and they said, "Would you consider doing something for Parkinson's like you did for Alzheimer's?" And I said, "Why recreate the wheel? Let's just do the overlay of that legislation for Parkinson's." And with over 1 million people struggling living with Parkinson's in this country, it made sense. We would have then the two most neurologically impacting diseases under these given separate plans to search for a cure and earlier and better diagnoses and whatever treatments that we can come up with that would be a success for the patient and the families. So that's where I had worked steadfastly with Gus, and I knew that issue was important to him because his brother was living with Parkinson's, and he had passed, and we named the legislation in his memory and his honor, along with that of our colleague Jennifer Wexton, who is living with Parkinson's, that had served with us. And so, making great progress in that regard too. But again, focused heavily, on research and investments in hearing from all the related agencies from the federal government and the outside world, and clinicians and researchers and doctors and patient advocates and patients themselves. And now we're structured with those two concepts. Boards have been the slots on the boards have been filled, and we're ready to go forward and work steadfastly to get to that cure for each of the two issues.
So, looking out forward now for the caucus, what are the caucus's Longevity Science Caucus's priorities for the next few years? So what else do you want to accomplish?
Well, obviously, there's an effort made now to gather information in terms of professionals in the field. Those can inform and educate us in a way that allows us to move forward with the science-based, kind of outcome, so that that science-based, evidence-based discussion and input can lead us to progressive formats of policy, and there builds sponsorship or membership, I should say, first with the caucus, so that there is this bipartisan, bicameral, we hope, discussion that enables us to establish those relationships with stakeholders and to hear from the medical field, the science-based fields, about what can be done, especially at a time when there's like a blip going backward with longevity, and life expectancy in this country. And it is important for us to take heed of that and to go forward and establish that formal setting that can invite people, and then hopefully expand into, I was there at the table to form SEEC, the Sustainable Energy and Environment Coalition, my very freshman days in 2009. And today that format started with just a handful of members. It's 111 members strong now. It's open to bipartisan, but it's all Democrats on that coalition. We then expanded to an institute, which now has a staff, and they do outreach with various individuals across the country who have a high interest and a very keen involvement.
And you think we can replicate something like that?
Oh,
with
absolutely.
Longevity, but but actually get bipartisan.
Well, because it's
membership.
a bipartisan issue. When people speak
all
of longevity and wellness and prevention and better health and research, and the opportunities that research presents, this helps with formulating that strength of numbers. Every individual voice in the House and in Senate matters. Each individual voice matters, but cumulatively, that collective impact, saying all of us are a team we believe in this strategy, these priorities, these outcomes. That helps.
And so you mentioned it's been good to work with
Yeah.
Representative Bilirakis. In general, do you see this more? Do you feel like there's good bipartisan support for this more broadly?
I sense there's good bipartisan support. I mean, our first order of business is, informing and educating our colleagues as to why this is helpful and why it's essential. Then building that membership, then creating those relationships with the outside world, where they have obviously every right to and responsibility to connect with their representatives. But this gives you a bigger platform and acknowledges that there's a high priority established by these members of Congress to address these issues. And hopefully that is a welcome banner. And then you tend to get more and more integrity as a group. You build that integrity, and people will reach out. I've seen it with SEEK. People will reach out with that coalition. They want to come in and talk about dual fueled opportunities where they use clean and traditional energies, and talking about the environment and the threshold marks in time and responsiveness that we need to achieve. So it does build a universe of support, and I think this will bring together a lot of keen minds that have a lot to say and a lot to offer. And the interaction, the involvement, I find that in my district to be very keen. It's very science loaded. We have a chips manufacturing facility that's now expanding, one of the largest in the state, in the country, and Global Foundries is now being partnered, or down the road we have the whole investment of Micron. So, and of course the history of IBM with New York State. So you find you have these stewards of environment, of these academicians that are raring to go, and I think that each of us, if we grow that membership and cover the regions of the country, the geographic regions, I think anything can happen.
We have some
strength in numbers.
We have some longevity companies in upstate New York. I don't know if any in the Albany region, but yeah. But
and a lot of labs that work with federal grant monies that need to be maintained, if not enhanced.
So I'm going to ask one more question, then we'll open it up to questions from the audience. So zoom out and sort of look to the far future and put on your optimistic glasses. How do you think progress in this area is going to, aging longevity area, what do you see in 15 to 20 years in this country, optimistically? Are we going to have more funding in this area? Or are we going to have faster regulation? Are we going to have some actual deployed cures? How do you think the government's going to be organized around this?
Well, hopefully it'll be a high priority to address longevity. But my goals, short-term and long-term, are to bring back a respect for science and make that a cornerstone of a lot of policy. That, it needs to be science-based, evidence-based. We can't treat a lot of these things with politics. I'm in the energy area for many years of my public service in state and federal government, and it's run by physics, not politics. And so truth matters, science matters. So one of the goals and one of the views that I have with the rose-colored glasses is a huge respect for science and appreciation for science and a weaving of science into the policy development. Huge investments in research that are unshakable, that are there building good relationships with the academic campuses of this country and the medical community, making certain that research is given. I recently did a tour just in the last month with Soul Veteran, and just the concern that people have about the cuts to research, you're suffocating hope, and that's unacceptable. So a respect for science, an investment in research, and certainly a relationship with the outside world that has grown so significant that we're seen as a go-to, and inspired by the success we've achieved over 10, 20, 30 years, whatever that threshold you took me to was.
All right. Well, hopefully that will come about. All right. So we'll open it for questions. Come down to the microphone and try to.
Thank you
Anybody
for
have
you and
any
your
questions?
dad being such great inspirations. So
Come on, Scott. You've got to have a question.
this is a good-looking audience, by the way.
Okay.
You're
Well,
very
here, Oki's got a
attentive.
question. Okay.
Hi, Congressman. I was interested in the thing you said earlier about being a bipartisan caucus, but just kind of devil's advocate. We've struggled to grow the caucus a little bit in the last few years since it was started. Why shouldn't we pick a party and try to grow it by making it a partisan issue?
Why shouldn't you make it a partisan
Why
issue?
should we keep it a bipartisan issue in caucus as opposed to trying to make it more popular by making it a partisan issue?
Well, I think eventually that crumbles. I think you really need that partnership. Look, I realize that there's a lot of polarization right now, and at times it feels like it's growing wider and deeper. But all in all, I think that we govern best when we are in the middle and getting people from both sides invested in the issue. What I try to do as a member of Energy and Commerce is reach out to colleagues from the Republican side as a Democrat, one-on-one, no 2 or 3 members to one or staff and members gathering, just doing one-on-one breakfast, lunch, dinner, whatever, get to know each other. I think relationships in any aspect of work are important, or any aspect of life are important. And we don't do enough to develop relationships. So I try to do that, find out about my colleagues' reason to want to serve. Why did you give up time with family and community to come to Washington? What are your goals? What's your background? What feeds your soul? And that to me is very helpful, because there's still going to be forces that try to dismantle. But if we have those relationships, we're building trust. And I think trust takes you a long way to getting stuff done in a bipartisan way. And in the long run, that's what's foundational. If people have buy-in from both parties, you can see that that effort going farther and longer.
Thank you.
Congressman, hi.
Hey,
Thanks for being here. So you mentioned the cuts to NIH are unacceptable. I was an academic researcher. Now I'm at a company. So I think cuts or maybe reprioritization is the issue. I think, in my experience, I did very well with NIH grants, but I will say there definitely is there's not always a great use of the money. I mean, I would say the way it's set up right now. So I do think if we could direct more towards aging, maybe away from these siloed fields, that would be a way to actually use the money in better ways. So,
Well, yeah, certainly investing in research is important, but accountability and transparency need to accompany that journey, because you want to make certain that they're being invested and spent in accordance with legislative intent.
Yep.
And, there are those who criticize public sector investment in research.
Yep.
But I think there's this growing force of public-private partnership in economies around the world. And I think it takes us backward. We need to compete with the other economies on this whole effort. I mean, some of the research activity is a guaranteed way to grow jobs.
Yep.
And to be respected in the global community.
So I have a solution. Harvard is being sued as this kind of false claims. I've seen this lawsuit that's been happening since such have pretty widespread effects on research, because the big problem in research is you start doing one thing and then maybe you get a grant on that and then you realize something else is the better direction. So there's a lot of research where you start one place, again, could be good intentions, but you're not actually doing what you propose. So taxpayers have a reason to think this is not good. Aging solves this problem, because if you're focusing on aging, you've got kind of much more optionality. I think it's a much more open-ended way to actually pursue research and not be siloed. Like if you are studying the kidney, and you find something out about the liver, well, you wrote about the kidney, so you're not restricted, to doing that research if that's where the science actually goes. I think if you're taking a holistic aging approach, that's a way to solve this problem of making false claims. That again, this Harvard case, everyone should be looking into this, because this, probably over half the research.
Right.
funds
So I think
in
we should
America-
get going, but I think
Yeah.
to summarize, he's saying that there'll be less fraudulent claims about people switching research areas if the umbrella is that it's targeted at aging to begin with.
Right, and just quickly, I'll make the point also that, talking to research facilities, business efforts in my district that are funded by both public and private streams of revenues, when they were threatened with losing some of their funds, is that, what people need to realize as policymakers is you can't just shut research on and off. It's much more complicated than that. And these were folks that were working and making great progress on macular degeneration, Parkinson's, and what was the other one? And Alzheimer's.
I understand that. Yeah.
So,
All right, Dylan, we have a couple more people who want to ask questions, but are we out of time now?
yeah.
Or are you going to stick around for any?
You mean to send them to the office? Oh, absolutely, absolutely. I just told a group of college students who came in like 40 or 50 strong today about advice on the job, because some of them are looking at poli-sci and a career in government. And I said, well, the very first attribute that you require, I believe, as a candidate and as a representative, is to be a good listener. People run right to being a good orator, but I said you have to be a good listener. Otherwise, you don't succeed. Yeah?
Thank you for joining us.
Okay. All right. Thank you, everyone. Thanks. We're out of time.